You're listening to Conversation Balloons, interviews with experts and friends about how the generations can help each other thrive. I'm your host, Leah Farish. Check out this episode. Elliot Felix is our guest today. He's the author of How to Get the Most Out of College, 127 Ways to Make Connections, Make It Work for You, and Make a Difference. Thank you for coming on, Elliot.
It's my pleasure to be here.
Elliot has been a consultant to over 100 higher ed institutions to encourage research-based success for their students. And he's conducted around 2,000 interviews and focus groups with students to find out their current needs and aspirations. And we just think you're a gold mine of information. So we're excited to talk to you today about how to choose a college and, more importantly, how to make the most of it once you get there. Could I ask you kind of a personal question first?
Absolutely.
What was your own undergrad experience like? I know you studied architecture and became an architect for a while, but what was just the student experience like for you, and where was it?
My undergrad experience was unique and also, I think, lucky. And it was unique in that I finished high school a year early, and I decided with my would-be senior year to study architecture in Brussels. I thought, let's kind of get on with it. I live and breathe this stuff, and why not study abroad? And so I applied to colleges from Belgium and used a kind of a backwards approach, which is that I applied to a bunch and I visited the ones that I got into. And I really fell in love with the University of Virginia. And I did. It was an amazing campus. You know, you're inspired by Jefferson, and as an architect, not only of democracy but of an amazing campus. Mm-hmm. And it was really a great mix of being able to learn about architecture in the context of liberal arts and to do both. And most of the other places I was looking at, you kind of had to pick. You had to be with the same small group of folks really focused on architecture. And I really wanted this blend of liberal arts. I wanted to learn how to write. I wanted to learn how to think critically, to communicate, to collaborate, while I was learning those things and more in the architecture studio. I was so lucky to be part of a close-knit community. We had our own space, and that space helps build community. And my professors were also working in the profession, so I could see how what I was doing was going to have real-world impact. So I went about it in a kind of a weird way, but I feel like I came out okay, and I was really lucky to have that experience.
Yeah. Oh, I've spent some time on that campus, and it is inspiring. It's a very special place.
Yeah.
You chose well.
Yeah.
So tell us some of your advice to students who are choosing college, and how do you pick wisely?
Well, I think as a whole, we spend a lot of time thinking about where to go to college and not nearly enough about how to go to college. And so perhaps not surprisingly, I think you should pick the where based on the how. So you should think about places that are going to set you up for success, that are going to increase your chances of success based on how easy or hard it is to do the things that are proven to make you successful. So that's kind of my take on things. Choose the where based on the how. And the things that make you successful in college and afterwards are things like working on real world projects in your classes. Like, let's say you're taking a marketing class, you could come up with a branding campaign or a social media strategy for a fictitious company you make up, or you could find one out in the community. Like maybe there's a startup or there's a local nonprofit that needs your help. And when you do that, you're meeting people, you're making an impact, you're building skills, maybe they need an intern in that in this summer. I think you look for those things, and you look for places that make it easy to do them, that really encourage them to do them. Or leadership is another thing. Like, do they have a center to help students become leaders, to learn those skills, to practice, to make it to make an impact? So I think you look for the things that make you successful, and look at the places that are gonna they're gonna help you rather than hinder that, the places that really promote those things.
I think that's wonderful advice. It's great advice to a mature student who knows what he or she wants academically. And I'm interested that you focus on the academic and ultimate career success in your answer there. Having taught undergraduates, I, I find that at least freshmen still don't know the answers to basic questions like, what do you want to major in? What do you want to accomplish while you're here? And I can imagine going back to junior or senior year before they got there, they're even more informed. Um, is there a step prior to all that you talk about that students should engage in?
There is, and as we got talking about it a little bit earlier, my background is in architecture and design, and so I look at design as a way of thinking, as a way of finding and solving problems, and that's really the approach that I would recommend for everyone. Is to take the kind of the principles and the practices of design and use them to design your life. So I think the step before that is really the most critically is the understanding yourself and the trying things out.
Mhm.
And so, just in the same way that no finished product, no idea for a product like hits the shelf right after somebody thinks it up. It goes through lots of testing and prototyping, and this is what students can do in high school, in middle school, even have lots of experiences and learn from those experiences about yourself and who you want to be, who you want to be with, who you want to become. So if you're thinking about accounting, spend a day in an accountant's office, just or an hour or an afternoon. Like, what's their day like? But you want to have a lot of experiences to like prototype your future.
Mhm.
Maybe you even meet your future self, and you ask them about their path.
Mhm.
And I think in the process you learn about where you might head, and a little bit more about who you are.
Mhm. Yeah, we did an episode with a consultant named Tammy Peterson that does more of the high school guidance
Hmm.
toward these choices. And everyone, I'll put that on our show notes today if you want to go back and listen to that. If the person you know or you don't know that you know yourself well enough to choose the right college, this is a great time to find out more about this and engage in what Elliot's talking about. Um, I I also found that in my own choice of a college, I didn't know the school. I really didn't know how to do the research on what they offered, and fortunately, I made a good choice in spite of myself. But in applying, when they said, "What would you like to major in?" I said linguistics. They didn't even have a major in linguistics, but they admitted me anyway, and Duke University and I got along very well. My choice was I got accepted to 3 schools, and I noticed the tone of their correspondence with me. I noticed how responsive or non-responsive they were. I noticed whether they presented themselves as stuffy and superior and stodgy, or whether that there was this kind of a lilt in Duke's communications with me, but there was something youthful and something almost not impudent, but very good natured about the way they talked about themselves and what we could do together that I really picked up on, and I also considered the climate, the weather of the place.
Hmm.
I've found that students uh, underestimate how much time they'll be outside if they live on campus. If they have a traditional student experience, um, they will probably be out walking much more than ever.
Yeah.
Um, and
And
you,
it really affects your orientation too. I mean, I think
yeah,
one thing I've heard from lots of folks working at colleges and universities is part of the part of the struggle sometimes for transfer students. You know, if you're starting in January instead of September in a cold climate,
mhm,
is so many of those first impressions you make and those first relationships and how you get oriented. So much of that happens outside,
that's right.
and yeah. I mean, climate's definitely a consideration.
You can even look at the Bureau of Justice statistics. I think they are still collecting data on crime on campus. Um, I will say most higher ed institutions did not want to do that, but um, that can affect student experience for sure. Um, my roommate and I were attacked in our room on campus, the Duke, and
Oh my gosh,
someone else down the hall was actually raped by the same people, and it was very scary.
awful.
But it didn't affect me academically or anything. But these things are real. These are a bunch of young people without a lot of good judgment developed yet, and sometimes very little security. Our door was
Hmm.
open in the middle of the night, and that's how it happened. And we weren't thinking. And so you can, some people, when they go off to Northwestern, they have no idea of the environment. When you step off of the campus of Northwestern, what kind of a setting you're in. And
What's Evanston like? Yeah.
yeah, that
Yeah, I mean the setting, the safety, the scale, um, the support that you're going to receive. These are all, I think, these are all important considerations.
you even mentioned that it had been found that dorms that are arranged along a hallway develop more sociable interactions than maybe the pods,
Yeah,
the clusters. You would think it would be just the opposite, but that was an interesting
yeah,
finding.
yeah. They call it a socializing architecture because dorm rooms along a hallway, um, there you get more interaction with more people, whereas in a suite, you may know those few people, but you won't know people down the hall, or you're less likely to. So, one study found, uh, a higher sense of community and also slightly increased grades.
Let's talk about maybe the first week when they arrive on campus, uh, assuming they're traditional students. What are some keys to making that first week a good adjustment and a productive time?
Well, I think so much of my book and the big idea in how to get the most out of college is finding ways to take full advantage of everything that your college or university offers, or maybe everything is impossible, but certainly as much as you can, because colleges are these amazing places full with terrific people that are really they're there for the students. And one of the things that's really heartbreaking is to hear these stories of students that didn't know, um, that there was something that their university offered, whether it's the career services office or counseling or a certain course. And so I think, to really make the most of that, those critical first few weeks, there's a couple of key things. I think one is hit the ground running. So, there's lots of things you can do before you arrive. You can start, um, you can be talking to your roommate. You can be talking to people that might be have the same interests. You can find friends on Instagram. Maybe there's a Discord group that's already set up. So you can find friends on social. You can find friends through the university, and you can take a look at what's going on, so that you hit the ground running. And then I think once you're there, it's that same idea of exposing yourself, putting yourself out there, having lots of exposure to different events and opportunities and people and places. And I think, you're much less likely to be successful if you're, just staying in your residence hall, than if you are attending the, if it's an outdoor barbecue or whatever it might be, student activity fair, wandering around the campus.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's really about being prepared and then putting yourself out there and realizing that you walk into a group that you don't like, it's pretty low stakes. You can leave, you can leave.
Absolutely.
No hard feelings.
Yeah. And you're offering yourself to these organizations and activities too. So you're making a first impression, and they want you. They want you that first week. They
Yeah.
may get a little distracted later on, but it's a great way to feel wanted.
Yeah. And I think if you approach those initial conversations too, this is one of the great insights from one of the interviews that became a tip in my book. But like, approach those conversations not from what you're going to get, but what you have to give.
Yeah.
Right. So if you walk into a student organization meeting thinking, um, I really want to make a friend, that's great. But like, if you go in saying, I really want to, I really want to contribute, and this is what I have to offer, then, people will see that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, there's all kinds of research. There's a great book by Adam Grant, Give and Take, about how everyone benefits when you have that. You're approaching these things with a spirit of generosity.
Yeah. Yeah. I love, again, the maturity, the sophistication with which you encourage students to come to their college experience academically. How do you encourage students not just go to, get what they want out of the academic offerings, but to find congruence with what these professors know, and to learn how to learn more and be more open? I find a lot of students actually are not that open to taking a different approach. I think there's a danger in coming to college with an agenda, that is maybe incomplete, or that is going to need to evolve as you are exposed to all these academic challenges and offerings.
Everything I'm saying applies academically and socially, because I think these two things are intertwined. If you think about the high school student that's at their graduation party or their friends, the advice they're most likely to get from adults around them is, something like, study hard. But you really need people to study hard with, right? So the social side and the academic side are really intertwined. I mean, so much of what students are going to be doing is work in groups, and so much of what they're going to need to succeed is a support network. And that support network might be professionals like professors, or it might be peers, other students, or it might be folks that are kind of in between, peer mentors, RAs, these kinds of folks. And so I think you really want to blend the academic and the social. And I think part of that blending and finding inspiration, whether it's a peer or an RA or a or a professor, does have to do with having kind of an open mind. And I think this is this is a societal issue that's bigger than colleges, because I think increasingly people are listening to the people that agree with them, and associating with people that agree with them. You need there's a great book, Bowling Alone, but Robert Putnam. You, you, but it outlines you need not only bonding capital, within group like you in some way, but you also need bridging capital,
Yeah.
And make those connections to people that are different from you in some way. And unfortunately, only about 2/3 of students feel like they belong at their university.
Yeah, let's talk about that, because you have certainly investigated that, and yeah, that's sad that a third of them don't have that sense of belonging. You have found a correlation between a sense of growth and actually succeeding, and a sense of belonging. You said um, those who have a sense of belonging are 41% more likely to go from the first year to the second year. How does the student cultivate that, and how can the college help them?
Yeah. Well, that's a great that 41% comes from the National Survey of Student Engagement, or NSSE, and they recently added a module about belonging, which has a few different questions to get at it. And interestingly, they think it's more like 80% of students feel a sense of belonging. The 65% comes from the National College Health Assessment, and they're both big surveys that talk to lots and lots of students. So opinions vary, and then of course you have to ask yourself, these are only the students that are filling out the survey. How representative is the sampling? But I think everybody intuitively knows that this is an issue, um, because they've all been in a situation where they didn't feel included for one way or another, because, maybe it was about income or geography or race or income or background or whatever it might be.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you're right that belonging is there's institutional responsibilities and there's personal responsibilities and actions. And I think what institutions can do is really move from thinking about college as a big tent to thinking about college as a big tent that has lots of little niches inside of it. And those niches might be uh, supported by activities, events, student organizations, clubs, spaces, and they it might be where you live. It may be an idea, environmental sustainability. It might be an identity having to do with your race or ethnicity. It might be based on a professional identity. I'm going to become an engineer. It might be a mix of those, right? You might belong to the Society of Hispanic Engineers.
Mm-hmm.
So I think colleges and universities have to create those niches and then connect them to some larger, under some larger tent, and things like sports are often a great way to do that, or other campus-wide things.
I think
And then,
think of all the rituals at Texas A&M,
yeah,
just a whole lifestyle.
yeah. I mean, I think part of why people seek out, places with D1 sports is a lot of times those are really successful at creating a campus culture. And then I think, students have to take advantage of those and seek out the niches and try things out. And I think as they do, make sure that what they're looking for is acceptance, um, not fitting in. Because I think fitting in is kind of the wrong metaphor, right? Because it implies that you're somehow changing yourself in order to be a part of something. And I think what you want are groups that accept you for who you are. And there's a great book on this, Blake Silver, The Cost of Inclusion, which is one of the tips in my book is based on that, and it's about kind of being the real you, because what he found was a lot of students adopt these like kind of cookie cutter identities.
Mhm.
I'm the supporter, I'm the entertainer, I'm the caregiver,
Mhm.
and and you kind of get stuck in these roles as a sort of as a coping mechanism, because you're thrown, it's a pretty big deal to get thrown into a new environment. Maybe you don't know anybody, you're in a new place, you're doing new things. Like that's a lot.
Mhm.
But the problem is like then you kind of get pigeonholed, or you get stuck in these cookie cutter identities, and people only see you that way.
Talk to us about this sense of growing that you identified that is correlated with student success. What you said that students who feel like they're growing in that setting will stay there. How is that measured? What does that look like to have a sense of growth?
Yeah, so I think there's lots of different ways to define growth, and every year, um, for the last 4 or 5 years, I've led a survey effort to kind of take the pulse of students nationally about their student experience. And this was a really interesting finding from last year's survey, that the students who felt like they were growing personally and professionally were the ones that are the most satisfied with their experience, the most likely to recommend their university. And we define growth looking at whether students feel like they're gaining confidence, whether they're building skills that are valuable, um, whether they feel like they're part of a community, um, uh, and whether they're being challenged. So four or five things like that. And it was quite interesting. It really jumped off the page to see that as kind of a division. Basically, if students feel like they're growing, then they're happy, and if they don't, then they're not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I found when I was teaching I taught at 4 or 5 different colleges, that the students who had serious time management issues didn't succeed. That's almost a
Yeah.
circular statement, but the students don't see it that way. Um, they see their time management problems as completely different from their academic problems or social problems, and yet I when I would see, and as an undergraduate myself, when I would see students sitting around for long, indeterminate times after a meal, I could almost guarantee you they weren't going to be back next semester.
Yeah.
They they didn't have the structure that was needed. Students, we all, this is proverbial, but when you go to college, you have so much more freedom to manage, and some just don't manage it.
Yeah. Well, and I think that goes back to two of the points from before that we were talking about. One is, if you apply this design mindset and you're prototyping and you're trying things out, um, you want to get exposure to having freedom and having to manage your time and structure your time and prioritize and so forth beforehand, right? So you get a running start. And I think the second thing is, this is time management, for instance, is one of the many things that colleges and universities offer to help students that students may not know is available or is for them. I've talked to students that didn't know the tutoring was free because, tutoring in high school generally is some extra thing that
Oh,
you
yeah.
pay
It's
for.
very expensive.
But, I've been really fortunate to transform dozens of university libraries into student success hubs. And part of that is you bring all these different services together to support students to meet them where they are and to blend or combine kind of study and support.
Mhm.
And so if you go to a modern, next generation university library now, you'll find a tutoring center, a student support center, right, that can do subject-based tutoring to help you on your calculus homework or on skills, how to manage your time, how to prioritize
Mhm.
things. They'll also have the communication center that can help you, that can take a video of you making a presentation and then coach you through how to do it better, or a writing center that can go through your paper and help you come up with a better, they're not going to write it for you, but help you come up with a better thesis or a better flow, or
Mm.
a data lab that can help you visualize and analyze your data, a maker space to make a prototype of that idea, a media lab to help you shoot and edit the video about your idea.
Oh, yeah.
So there's just like amazing stuff
Mhm.
at every college and university. A teaching and learning center that can help you work better as a group.
Yes.
Um, a leadership center that can help you work better as
Mhm.
be a better leader. So it's most of these common pitfalls actually have solutions, but
Yeah.
the students have to know about it. They have to feel welcome. They have to feel comfortable.
Yeah.
They also have to have time.
Yeah.
Time is a big barrier.
Mhm.
Um, and so I think, universities are also getting a lot smarter at integrating things, right? Instead of like, hey, go to career services in the spare time that you don't have, they're making a career exploration course a required part of the curriculum,
Mhm.
right? So early on, maybe even in your first semester, you're thinking about who you are and who you want to be, and you're meeting people and you're talking to role models and you're trying things out. So, back to the whole choose the where based on the how, that's something you can look for, right? You can, in addition to looking for, do they do project-based learning, experiential learning, internships, do they integrate career services?
Mhm.
Do they have a next generation library? Do they have all these student success support services?
Mhm. And I found that several of my, especially freshmen, but not just freshmen, uh, were very ashamed for me to find out that they really did not know how to use their laptop for research. They did not understand digital tools at all, and they knew that they're all seen as these brilliant digital natives who go, swimming in all this and can magically find academic articles by topic, and that is not true. Someone has to teach. Maybe someone doesn't have to teach you how to use Twitter, but they have to teach you how to use, EBSCO-host or whatever. um,
Right.
and another warning sign I have seen is when a student is not managing their sleep, they're sleeping abnormally, and they come in and say, I
Mhm.
haven't slept for 3 days. Or, you have a 3 o'clock class and they say, a 3 o'clock class, and they say, um, I'm sorry, I overslept. And they're sleeping, 14 hours a day. They're possibly depressed, they're chronically ill, and they just don't realize it. And I would say to parents, if you find that your college student is telling you this about at college or even when they get home, there's very unusual sleep, make sure, do they just need an eye patch because it's so bright in their dorm room, or their roommate has someone else living in there, or is very
Yeah.
thoughtless about the noise level or whatever, that can really undermine the academic experience, and the student will not usually attribute their academic failure to that. They don't
Yeah.
recognize
Well, and
as a
these,
problem.
you know,
That'll keep you up all night.
there's pretty much a direct correlation with more time, more time on Instagram is hours sleep lost. It's almost a
Absolutely.
one to one.
I knew a student who was a junior, and he was thinking of leaving a very structured school. I'm talking about a junior in high school, leaving a very
Mm-hmm.
structured school to end with senior year being a collegiate model, they call it, and a
Mm-hmm.
lot of like homeschool co-ops or even private schools are offering, concurrent enrollment in college, or just you take just certain courses in high school, others you do online, whatever. And I thought I took this student to the collegiate model school, and I thought in my head, if he takes notes while he's meeting with the headmaster, I'll recommend that he does it. If he takes the initiative and shows that he wants to remember this information because it's his responsibility, then I'll know that he's ready. He didn't take notes. He just let the
Mm-hmm.
headmaster tell him all the ins and outs of making all this logistics possible. And I knew no one could remember all that. And afterwards, I said, you know what? I think you need to stay where you are in your structured environment, because I think you're going to be gobbled up by the ambiguity of an unscheduled day. And he did fine.
Yeah.
And then later, he was ready for college. He could handle it. But I noticed that you said that you reported from this study that non-traditional students have were more often reported a sense of growth from their college experience. And I thought that was interesting because, having taught at a community college where I had non-traditional students, they usually were more task oriented and focused. They knew why they were there. They knew what they had come for, and they, felt the benefit of what they were getting. But you hope that
Yeah. I mean, I think
happens too. Yeah.
one thing we certainly found, we did find, in terms of the sense of growth, we found um, women more than men, had a higher sense of growth. We found adult learners, um, had over 25 had a higher sense of growth.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and we found student parents, right? So students who have children of their own, which is about 20% of the undergrad population, also had a higher sense of growth, even when controlling for the fact that they might be older. So yeah, so it is interesting to see that, both that how important growth is, but also how it might be experienced, unevenly.
Mm-hmm. Are you finding that more students are ambivalent or reluctant to come to college because of the sense of maybe a career not being guaranteed from their degree?
Yeah, I think that's certainly contributing to the there's an increasing sense that you don't need to go to college to get a great job, and there's a lot of data that says, on average, that says otherwise, and says there's significant earnings, there's longer life expectancy, there's all sorts of benefits, but that those are on average, right? And so some people will exceed that average and some will be under it. I always caution people about averages by saying, combined, Michael Jordan and I averaged 3 championships each. Um, so, so I think you do have to be careful with that. But I do think with the rising price, there is certainly increasing scrutiny about the value relative to the price. What's the ROI going to be? And I think that's a function not only of where you go, but also what you study. I think choice of major has a major, I guess no pun intended, impact on that. And now there's great data. There's all sorts of great ROI studies because of the college scorecard. We now have longitudinal data about who majored in what, and what are they making post graduation.
Yeah, you mentioned, I think you mentioned college scorecard.
Mm-hmm.
Does that ring a bell? Tell us about.
Yeah, so that's a U.S. Department of Ed resource that was created, maybe during the Obama administration, and because colleges and universities have all kinds of federal reporting requirements in order to receive funds, that data is pooled and used and freely available for folks to look at. And you can look at it just at a snapshot view where you can look up a college and it'll have the average net tuition and fees, what people actually pay versus the sticker price. It'll have the graduation rate, and it'll have the average starting salary overall in aggregate. But then you can drill down by major, and there's lots of great studies that take that data and make sense of it. There's Third Way, a think tank, has done great work with that. Preston Cooper recently came out with a white paper that looked at that and also accounted for the fact that lots of people enroll in college, but unfortunately don't graduate or haven't graduated yet. They've stopped out or dropped out.
Well, would you like to, as we conclude, give a final tip to our audience about how to get the most out of college?
Yeah, well, I've certainly appreciated this conversation, and I hope it helps folks think about where to go and how to go, and I think it really is this idea of seeing yourself as the designer of your own future, and knowing that no product idea hits the shelf immediately, but it needs to be tested and prototyped, and so too with your own education and your own life and your own relationships. So if students and families can approach things with that idea that they're testing things out, some things will work, some things won't, but everything will be a chance to learn. And as they learn, they'll know more about themselves, and they'll know more about who they want to be and who they want to be with and what they might become. Then they'll really set themselves up for success.
Well, thank you so much, Elliot. Elliot Felix, everybody, get his book.
Thank you.
How to Get the Most Out of College. Thank you so much for visiting today. Bye-bye.
My pleasure. Great conversation.
Thanks for listening to Conversation Balloons. Look for more episodes and information at leahfarish.com. That's LEAHFARISH.com. And follow me on Facebook and Instagram.